Hello, everyone. Thank you for checking out this episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny.
I'm Matt.
I'm Seth.
Randall.
So today, this is actually a continuation of sorts of a previous roundtable discussion we had about magic items, about how to make them more magical. So we decided we're going to start focusing on different aspects of magic items in role-playing games. And today we're going to talk about potions. So I will pass it to Matt, and he'll lead the discussion.
All right, so potions. So we go back to the beginning. In the first edition Dungeon Master's Guide, Gary Gygax tells us that potions are usually found in vials. He describes them as being ceramic, crystal, glass, or metal. There's usually one dose per vial. Now, this is interesting because I started playing with second edition, and, you know, at the table, you kind of lose sight of what maybe the original rules were. So originally, potions could be ID'd or identified by sampling a little bit of them. You just took a little drink, a little tiny taste, and you get a little inkling of what the potion actually did. Originally, you could identify a potion by sampling a little bit. But he also said that the potions should not be uniform, so they're not easy to identify without sampling them. And I think the idea was that some of them are poison, and Gary Gygax could be a real jerk sometimes with his death throws. Also in the DMG, we've got the wonderful Miscibility Tables when you mix two potions together. Those are always fun. You can sometimes they explode, sometimes they're lethal, and sometimes you can even discover a new potion. So that's great. So that's how potions started in the game. But we've all used potions in our games, often as kind of a one-shot magic item for everybody. Every class could use that. So, Emmanuel, how do you use potions in your games?
Well, to me, there's almost like there's two types of potions. There's the healing potions and everything else.
Yeah.
So with healing potions, I would use that to give to my players at times if I know that maybe the encounter might be too difficult for them. So I may have it available. And I do it sparingly. Like if they go to probably the only shop that may have it, maybe there's like 2 vials available, just so they don't overdo it. And you don't want that situation where it's like you have a bunch of vials and they're like 5 gold pieces each, and oh, you forgot that one player has 200 gold pieces. Guess what they're doing with it?
Yeah.
So there's that, and then there's what I mean by the other. So when it comes to other potions, I try to be very careful how I give. I try not to make them random because it could sometimes put a wrench in your game. So what I do is that I when I plan, let's say, a dungeon, and I know there's a trap coming up or an instance that might require some ingenuity in some way around it, I may give them a certain potion, like let's say an invisibility potion, so that it may help them get around that instance. Now, I try not to tell them what they want to do it for. I try to avoid that completely. I want them to figure out what they want to do with it. And sometimes I get like good surprises from the players when they find another way to use it that I didn't plan for, and that's fine. Actually, I prefer that. I actually reward them if they get an instance by finding creative ways of using the items that they have, instead of just always like hacking and slashing. But that in a nutshell is what I use potions for in my games.
Cool. Yeah. How about you, Randall? What do you do with potions?
I mean, similar to Manny, I think I would go, there's a point where I think about potions in a very specific way, though, and it's a way to balance the game when I don't want my party getting overpowered. Everybody wants all the magic items, right? But if I give them a ring of invisibility, then I've really kind of ratcheted up their abilities to a point where I can't predict how they might use it or if it makes them too powerful. Right. Versus a potion is consumable, right? I know that, hey, one-time use, right? And then we're done. So I think I tend to lean more on potions sometimes than I would magic items, especially at lower levels, because I want to get them feeling awesome and doing cool things, but I don't want them to be too reliant on that. And I don't also want them to break every campaign because, like, well, look at me, I'm Frodo, I got the ring, right? There's got to be some balance there. And so I think for potions, it's a nice way of giving them something without making it such a long-term impact on the game.
Yeah.
For that sort of one-time use. I agree with Manny on the healing potions, though. That's always a tricky one. And group composition matters. If there's a cleric or a paladin, they're going to heal. The other thing I do with healing potions, though, is I actually do go with the recommended cost of healing potions straight out of the 5th edition guide, which is they aren't cheap, man. They're like 50, it's like 50 gold for a basic healing potion. It's like there's some economy here.
Yeah.
So if they're going to buy them, they're going to pay for those things. But of course, they find some once in a while too.
Sure. All right, Seth. How about your side of the screen? What do you think of potions as a player?
Well, in my experience, potions are even from what I've seen, potions are even rarer than magic items. You might find one or two, but I've always played in games where you couldn't readily identify them. So you'd have them, but you have no idea what you're doing with them. And then it just turns into I'm about to die. I'll just take this. Hopefully it does something cool. I also like when potions aren't the typical in a nice little glass vial. Like maybe it's a healing potion, but it looks like slime and you wouldn't normally drink it. But it turns out it's a healing potion, but for another race. So I like it when they're different. They're different makeups.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said, identifying potions. So what do you guys like for identifying potions? So on one end, there's Gygax's suggestion of allowing people to sample them a little bit, it's a potion of levitivity and you feel lightheaded, or it's a potion of invisibility and your tongues disappear. Your tongue disappears.
What are the original rules for identifying a potion? How could you identify a potion?
I think that's actually literally the only one was sample.
Yeah, you tasted it.
Or take it to a potion maker, maybe.
So you couldn't cast spells on it to try to identify it because it's not technically a magic item, right?
Well, it is a magic item.
I'm not sure identify was a spell in 1st edition anyway.
Identify.
Oh, sorry, I'm thinking
such a weird spell, and it changed so much that I'd actually have to go and look it up. But they did have specialists in 1st edition. They had an alchemist, which someone who helps you make potions. So I would imagine if you took it to the alchemist and paid him a bunch of money, he'd tell you what it was.
Okay, but in a dungeon per se, there'd be absolutely no way to tell.
In a dungeon, you have to sample it. Those are the rules as they're written. But so there are other ways to go around that. I've been okay
with it. This is one of those fun. So much of this, I think, is context specific, right? It really kind of depends on your party and the situation and stuff like that. I will say I've never done the tasting, and I've never had anybody ask to do a potion tasting. I feel like they're at a brewery suddenly, and they're like, "Hey, bring me out a sample platter, and I'll try them." Usually what I'll do is either, well, I should say this, the game has evolved, right? And it's funny sometimes to think about the way D&D as played, not necessarily as written, has co-evolved with video games.
Right.
So, in most video games, if it's a blue potion, it's healing, right? And so even in D&D, I run into players all the time who are like, what color is it? Blue? Okay, that's a healing potion. And I'm like, guess what? Not anymore. But I mean, I think there are cues that you can, breadcrumbs that you might want to leave for your player that I do sometimes. Maybe it has something to do with a certain smell, or, if it's a really pungent, nasty smell, maybe that's an indicator to them it's not a positive effect. Like you can play that game with them a little bit. Color is another one. If there is a wizard or somebody who is, as you said, trained in sort of the alchemy or the arcanist arts, then I'll let them make an attempt at identifying something if they've got enough background in their character that maybe they've seen that sort of thing before. The key, though, I think with that is you never give them an absolute, right? Like you never say, oh, yes, you identify that's clearly a healing potion. Like, no, you're 75% confident that's a healing potion. Right? Like you want a little bit of doubt in there for that.
Sure. I like to leave them hints
Yeah.
that they can try to puzzle out, and they're magical, they're elixirs, so I really kind of lean into that. So if it's a potion of invisibility, maybe the potion is invisible, the liquid is invisible, you can hear it, you can feel it, but you can't see it. Or maybe it's a potion of levitation, and the liquid all sits at the top of the vial instead of at the bottom.
What would you do for giant? A potion of giant size. That's what I want to know.
Well, okay. So I was just about to say, if you can't think of anything to do there, you could write a poem or something. In a recent issue of Knights of the Dinner Table, they found a potion of giant strength, and it was in a wine bottle, and the wine bottle had some sort of poem on it. I can't remember it, but some sort of poem on it about strength or friendship and something like that. So, just something for the characters to talk about. So you could also have like the history of the potion kind of give an indication of what it is. Maybe it's actually a vial of a hero's blood, right? And it turns out to be a potion of heroism or something.
Right.
So
yeah, it's a sort of environmental storytelling.
Yes.
That you really kind of lay back on, and depending on where they find it, who they got it from, the characteristics of the potion itself, they can kind of help tell that story a little bit. And I think not only does that give them hints, which you're looking for, but it actually adds, I think, to the depth of the world that you're creating too, that immersiveness. So.
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot of talk about creating potions in the laboratory and everything, which is great. I love the idea of an alchemist in his laboratory with the smoking bottles and the skulls on the wall and all mixing all that stuff. But what you don't want, or what I don't want, is it to become kind of a factory manufacture thing, like a factory floor full of gnomes mixing together pixie juice.
Yeah, the Moderna of the potion world. Right?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
That's a timely reference.
Yep.
So, but there are a couple other uses of potions that I wanted to touch on. Aside from one-shot magic users, you could kind of flip it around so that the potion, like a particular potion, could be the whole quest of the campaign or the adventure, like the elixir of life, like the alchemist's elixir of life. You have to find this to save somebody important who's dying. Of course, that's a little harder to do in a world where clerics can just heal everything. But still, if you played it right, you could do something like that. On the other hand, maybe the potion is part of the machinations of the villain, right? Maybe the villain is creating this terrible potion like a street drug or something, and is being passed around the city, and you have to figure out who's making this stuff. Or maybe there's nothing wrong with the potion itself, but it has a particularly vile ingredient that the cult keeps going after. Like witches' ointments of flying was traditionally made with unbaptized baby fat.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? So, if children are disappearing, maybe you want to find out who's making the potion and stop them. So, the potion doesn't have to be something that the players use. It could even be part of the adventure.
What I like about that, Matt, is I think potions too often get treated as a transactional item in the game. Right, it's like as Manny said, they go in, they buy we're going in to see the BBEG, so let's go stock up on healing potions, or or even if they just find one, sometimes it's too specific to what they're trying to accomplish. I think there's a lot more creativity that you can use potions for, and you just outlined a bunch of great ones. I hope somebody who's watching this is like taking notes, saying like, oh yeah, I could write that campaign in this, because there's just so much flavor there that you can do cool things with it.
You could also have a potion with an upside and a downside, meaning it's a potion of giant strength, but your intelligence goes down, or it's potion of gaseous form, but only you turn in the gaseous, all your stuff just falls on the floor.
Right. That actually raises an interesting point. One of the things that it kind of bugs me a little bit about potions is that there isn't an after effect. right? Like I'm comfortable with like, oh, you took a potion of invisibility, you're invisible for an hour or 10 minutes or whatever the duration is. But I always felt like there ought to be an effect afterwards. Like you take a level of exhaustion, or you roll at disadvantage for something for a period of time after that. Again, just to kind of balance it out a little bit. I want a little bit of risk reward associated with it.
Right, because it's an actual abnormal effect.
Yeah.
It's not divine. It's somebody breaking the laws of physics, and your body isn't meant to be invisible. So yeah. I agree.
And just to jump in a little bit, especially what Seth said earlier concerning what you guys are saying now, it always bugs me a little bit that some of this, like all these healing potions work the same way almost every time. Like, all right, so let's say we all went to our kitchens and we all gonna make, let's say, oatmeal. I'll just pick oatmeal. I'm pretty sure everyone's gonna make oatmeal very different from one another. So why is it that different wizards are making like different types of healing potions? Yeah, like you said, like medicine works the same way, where Tylenol and ibuprofen, they help your headaches, but they're very different drugs. They have very different side effects as well. Shouldn't the same thing be with healing potions? Why should all healing potions sort of be the same way?
Well, that's absolutely true. Even when they mechanically do the same thing, they were never supposed to be uniform. It says right in the very beginning, right back in here, that because they're made by different wizards in different places, they taste different and smell different and look different. So there's all sorts of things you can do with that.
It's funny like how that's just such an interesting, I think, cultural reference to the way in which it has been interpreted over time. Like, I almost wonder if there's a research project here of like modern capitalism's effect on fantasy role play. Right? These things are just readily available wherever I go. I can find Tylenol, and I expect Tylenol will work the same way everywhere I go.
Like what you were saying before, and you could see a wizard alchemist type, but then you could also see a shaman out in the woods in his hut mixing slimes and molds and fungus, and it would technically have the same effect, but it would look completely different.
Yeah.
Well, even just the naming, like think about that. Like you walk into a shop and you're like, oh, where's the healing potions? Right. Well, that's another opportunity as a DM to really add some more flavor. Well, we don't call them healing potions. They're called Magnus's elixir of rejuvenation, or like you can add so much more to it you even just think about that.
Yeah. It's like try to go into an English convenience store, chemist as I call it, and try to ask for anything by the brand name we call them in America. Watch they look at you like you're an idiot.
Yeah.
But there's so many different ways to just describe it. For instance, it doesn't even have to have a potion. It could be an elixir, an ointment, a salve, all sorts of things. So one thing I wanted to mention was the Dungeon Alphabet. I've mentioned this game before.
Yeah.
This is the 4th edition, and in the 4th edition, they've added P is for potion, and so they have 20 great things to do to your potions. So they have dried potions and solidified potions in pill form, but then they have weirder stuff. They have addictive potions. Now that's interesting, right? You get addicted to your potion. They have sentient potions. The potion tries to run away and you have to catch it.
How about that?
What I liked was you find the potion in its component parts, so you have to mix them together. I know that's just a little thing, but it's something for the players to do, and you need the wizard to mix them together properly. Maybe you take them a roll to make sure it doesn't blow up in their face. That's kind of neat.
I gotta go back to the sentient potion for a second. So if I drink the sentient potion, does that mean that the sentient thing is now like in my body? And like, can I hear them talking?
Yes.
Do I have an internal monologue? Because that's
awesome. A running commentary of what it thinks of your insides.
It takes about 24 hours for it to process out of your body, but during that time, you're going to have.
You got to listen to it.
You got to listen to it. Yeah.
I love it.
That's fantastic. One thing you do with potions is you can try to think of different motivations for the original creator, right? Because they weren't, it seems like they were all created to be put in a dungeon for players to find, but clearly they weren't.
Yeah.
So, you know, you could have potions that were created for vastly different, you know, different motivations and reasons. You know, I had a potion I called the Wine of Nirvana. Seth came across this. It was, originally, it felt like a wine of gaseous form. So when you took it, you turned into a gaseous form. But not only did you turn into a gaseous form, but you started to lose your emotional connections with the material world. And so the potion lasted, the effect lasted as long as you wanted it to last. But the longer you stayed in that ethereal form, the less connection you had with the mortal world, and the harder it was to come back to mortal form. So if you were to say, okay, I want to let this go and be physical again, if you did it, you know, within a couple of rounds, no problem. But if you waited a turn, you would have to make a wisdom check to be able to do that, or else you've reached enlightenment and you just drift off into another plane of existence. And this was like, you know, an alchemist's dream. There was one of these potions, and it had been hunted across the you know, the centuries. It was fabled. So that's the sort of thing I like to do with the potion. You know, I get a little tired of the, you know, healing on the go potion. Oh no,
Yeah.
I'm damaged. I'd better pop a healing potion.
Yeah, the homebrew potions, I think there's so many opportunities to do cool things with those too. And I like that idea. Like, I love what you did there with again, huge benefit, but a big risk, right? Because forcing players to make those decisions, right?
Yeah.
Now, if they know about that ahead of time, they'll probably, I think to Seth's earlier point, they'll probably stash that in their bag and only use it as a last case, thing that
right.
sells out of trouble. But
there was only one of them, so they'd have to
right.
get a really good lore roll to know anything about it. And Seth, I believe you ran into that. How did it go?
You didn't. I actually drank it. So and it was actually useful because there were like some vents around that I used to scout and stuff. But I almost failed the role Matt was talking about and almost left the campaign. But luckily, I came back. I made it, came back. But yeah, I had no idea. Well, I have a habit of not knowing what a potion is and just drinking to see what it does. So
I should add, though, that even though he made the save and there was no mechanical effect, I did make sure to tell him that he was very sad and depressed because he had seen enlightenment and rejected it.
just like there was to do a little tangent, there was a changeling game where I actually bit into the golden apple, and because of that, every other food stuff that I would ingest from now until the character died tasted like ash, like nothing, because you tasted the best thing imaginable. Everything else pales in comparison.
Yeah, he actually had some ambrosia there, and afterwards he could find no joy in food. It was very sad.
Well, that's another, the cool thing there, though, is that that's another example of where, like, in this case, it wasn't a potion per se, but like this consumable item, again, more than a transactional thing. Like maybe you consumed it for a transactional purpose, but then it suddenly has an impact on the character long term. Right. And that's the stuff I really like. I like putting players in those positions where they have to undergo some kind of change or development. And I think items and consumables, like that's a cool thought. Like this potion, this is a life-changing experience for you, right? That's kind of a neat idea.
Well, just like corruption in Dungeon Crawl Classics.
Yeah.
The potion could have some sort of corruption. Like if it's a gaseous form, now your hair just looks like a cloud sitting on your head for the rest of your life. Yeah.
Has anybody ever done the, I think it's almost to the point of being a trope now, maybe I'm wrong. The discount potion rack at your local apothecary.
Oh, the potions that didn't come out quite right.
Yeah, so it's on the discount rack because either
Oh,
they're not sure what it is, or
it's like the Pepperidge Farm thrift store. Oh, okay, yeah.
yeah.
All right.
That I've had a lot of fun with that one because
Oh, okay. I've
my players tend to be
seen that before.
my
Okay.
players tend to be a little poor, right?
All right.
It's expensive to be an
Take a
adventurer.
gamble. Yeah,
And
take a gamble.
yeah,
It's like a potion grab bag.
exactly.
No, you could
Broken potions.
you can work out that really well in in a dungeon or a laboratory. I mean, you come into a laboratory that's had an I ran an adventure, and they came across a laboratory that had exploded because that's what laboratories do. So you could have all sorts of ancient potions in there that are dripping and broken, or that are fermented, or
Right.
or dried out, or you could have all sorts of potions that aren't quite right.
So I played a similar one. I had there was a it was just kind of a side quest during a larger campaign, but they were staying at this tavern / restaurant, and strange creatures kept showing up, and they did some investigation. They go underground into the basement. They find a place where the wall's broken open. They go through and discover that, there's this ancient fortress that was here once, but is gone now. But there's a chamber that sort of was left intact. And when they go inside, they discover that it used to be a lab. The potions got left there. There's construction, causes some of the shelves to fall over. The potions spill in, and the insects and the other animals start interacting with these potions that are mixing, and so you get weird mutations. And,
I like that. Kind of like a Rocks of Nim sort of thing.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Goblins of Nim. Cool.
You want owl bears? Because that's how you get owl bears.
Nice.
A question for everybody. What I know Matt showed some books. Is there any other books that you've used in the past when it comes to, like, for inspiration for making potions?
Ooh, for potion making.
I'll sort of go first. This is gonna sound strange, but like I don't remember anyone remembers Legends and Lore, the old Book of Gods from the old D&D days. I use that as a way for, like, for example, let's say if I knew of like a cleric made a potion, I will go research a little bit like what the gods were like. So like if you drank a healing potion from someone that worshiped Law, for example, they would drink it, and then these tiny spiders would come out of their wounds and start webbing their cuts and healing them from that. I know it's vicious, but
the coolest healing potion I've ever heard of, though.
You could have a healing potion that's it was made by a lizard shaman in a lizard tribe, and so when you drink it, it heals your wounds, but now your wounds, instead of skin, has lizard scales.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's slow. You can drink as much as you want, and it'll heal you, but it'll slowly turn you into a lizard person.
Or it makes
at least for a period
fall
of time
off and you regrow a new one.
Yeah, that works. Yeah.
My arm.
Well, the one that's coming to mind is, and it's actually pretty new. It's a strange story. And I know we're not trying to do product placement, and I'm really not at all here. But there was this, I think it was on Instagram or something. I saw this advertisement, and somebody had published a book called Fungus of the Far Realms. And literally, it was just kind of a pet project of theirs. I don't know if they were a botanist or something, but they had published this book. Each one had it looked like a journal, right? So they had like the sketches of these different fungi, and then they had created this sort of inventory, and each one had a unique name and all these different properties associated with it. And I thought it was just I wanted to support them. I was like, this is a really cool thing. And it's so obscure, right? It's never going to make it into canon. So I bought it, and then I was running a campaign that took place in the Underdark, and I thought, of course, I have to do this. And so I did. I pulled a few potions out of kind of the fungus that this person had detailed in that. That was just for me, it was kind of a fun thing to do.
Cool. I've seen that book before. I haven't picked up a copy though. That's by the same company, the Troika, I believe. I
think so too.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
In this case, I think it was an independent author, and that's like that. They went through them for publishing or something like that. But it's a neat little book. I mean, it's, you know, if you're into that kind of errata stuff, that's kind of cool.
Oh, all right. Well, then maybe I'll check it out. That sounds good.
All right. Well, viewers, thank you for checking us out. Do you have a book that gave you ideas for good potions? Do you have any cool stories you want to share? Let us know in the comments below. Get your shots. Get your potion. Get your healing
Your
potion.
potions, yeah. Yes. 2-dose
And,
potion. Yes.
and stay safe out there. Have a great day, everyone.